For my final college football playoff first round preview and prediction, we go to Columbus, Ohio, another Big Ten site hosting a first round game where it has just not been the season that anybody wearing scarlet and gray thought it was going to be. They were supposed to beat Michigan. Didn't happen, lost for the fourth year in a row. They were supposed to play in the Big Ten championship game. Didn't happen for the fourth year in a row. They were supposed to be a team that was national championship or bust. That's the thing, though. They still are. This team is talented enough to win the national championship, but so is the other team on the other side of the football. The Tennessee Volunteers stroll into Columbus with a phenomenal season, some phenomenal talent, and this one has all the makings for the best first round game that we will see this weekend. It's the Volunteers and the Buckeyes from the Horseshoe, and we'll preview this game here in just a little bit. What's up, Tailgaters? You're in the booth with Tailgate Nate today. Welcome to my channel, and welcome to my final college football playoff first round preview and prediction. And if you missed any of the other three videos, Notre Dame, Indiana, Penn State, SMU, or the likes of Texas and Clemson, go back and watch those after you've watched this one. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss any further college football playoff game preview and predictions, or any other video that I happen to upload to this channel, especially if you're as big of a college football nerd as I am. Do anything you can to help support the channel. It will mean a lot to me. I really appreciate all the support. And if you want to follow me outside of YouTube, go give me a follow on Twitter or X, or Instagram, or any other social media. It's at TailgateNate29. I appreciate your support however you are able to provide it. Let's now talk about the Volunteers and the Buckeyes, because in my personal opinion, I think this is going to be the best game of the college football first round action. But let's go ahead and tell you how we preview and predict games here on the channel. We are first going to dive into some keys to the game when each team possesses the football. So we are first going to look at this Tennessee offense against the Ohio State defense. And then we'll flip it. We'll take a look at the home side Buckeye offense against the Volunteer defense. And at the end of the video, we'll go through some more keys to the game. I'll tell you how I think this game is going to play out, give you some final thoughts, and then I'll predict a winner for who comes away from Columbus with a first-round playoff victory and the chance to go play the number one team in the country in the Oregon Ducks. Both of these teams have had up and downs this season. They both sit at 10-2. They both missed out on their conference championship game. And the College Football Playoff Committee gave us a little hint before the final bracket came out in the previous week on that this matchup was going to happen. It came to fruition, and I could not be happier. This is going to be an absolutely phenomenal game, and we will start by just simply diving on into things. We will start, of course, by previewing this Tennessee Volunteer offense. Nico Iamaleava, that is how you say that last name. He has been the quarterback for Tennessee this year, and it took him a while to really get settled in, to find his rhythm, especially in SEC play. It took him forever to get over 200 yards in an SEC game, but once he did, and when Nico plays well, this is a Tennessee team that is really, really hard to beat. 2,512 yards, 19 touchdowns, and 5 picks for Iamaleava this season, and he has got a plethora of wide receiver weapons to work with. Dante Thornton has been the lead guy this year, 647 yards and 6 touchdowns. Brew McCoy, Squirrel White, Chris Brazzell, and more. You have a lot of talented weapons in this Tennessee wide receiver room, but the guy that's probably going to end up being the X factor for Tennessee, and has been the X factor all season long, one of the leading rushers in the country, and it's why this Tennessee team averages over 230 yards per pop, or I shouldn't say per pop, but per game on the ground, and why they average around 5 yards per carry. Dylan Sampson, 256 carries, 1,485 yards, 22 touchdowns. That's right around 6 yards per carry, 5.8 to be exact, with rounding to the nearest decimal point. He really is the only guy in that backfield that can run. Iamaleava can get outside of the pocket and run. Not necessarily his strong suit. He would love to just sit back in that pocket and sling the football down the field. But Dylan Sampson, he has got to be the guy to step up for Tennessee, as he has been in a lot of games this season. He ran really, really well in the game against the Alabama Crimson Tide. He ran really well in the game against Vanderbilt, and in the game against Georgia. You take a look at what Sampson did, still was able to get over 100 yards rushing on that Georgia defense. Dylan Sampson is what drives this Tennessee offense. The offense goes as Dylan Sampson goes. And as far as performances that Dylan Sampson has had this year, I mean, you take a look at his recent games. Every game has been electric for him. The last time he was actually held to under 100 rushing yards in a game against a power opponent, he only had 11 carries in the game against UTEP. But you have to go all the way back to week 3, or maybe even week 4. Yes, week 4 against Oklahoma, 92 yards and only 3.8 yards per carry. That was all he was held to throughout 24 carries, and yet he has been phenomenal in every other game since then. Now, this is a Tennessee team that has seen some pretty good defenses. They have not seen a defense like they will see with Ohio State. This might purely, from a talent standpoint, be the best defense in the country. They actually lead the nation in fewest yards per game allowed. They lead the nation in fewest points per game allowed. They are one of the top 10 teams in the country in pretty much every statistical category. They don't force a ton of turnovers, but they can force you to turn the ball over. They got 35 sacks on the year. The third down defense is good, and it is the best red zone defense in the country. Ohio State could not slow the run against Michigan. They couldn't slow Kalel Mullings. They couldn't slow down Donovan Edwards. If Ohio State can't slow down Dylan Sampson, I wish this Buckeye team good luck, because that's what Michigan was able to do. And when you look at what Tennessee is, they have better quarterback play with Nico Iamaleava. They have a much better running back than Kalel Mullings or Donovan Edwards. With all due respect to those two, Dylan Sampson is just a different beast. They by far and away have a more experienced and talented group of wide receivers than what Michigan possesses, and Tennessee is more physical. They still like to play that smash mouth style of football. They love to lean on Dylan Sampson and that run game to drive this offense forward. If Ohio State can't slow that down, and Tennessee is able to grind this game away on the ground, it's going to be up to the Buckeye offense to pick up a lot of that slack. But what can Ohio State defense do, and what do they do well? Well, ever since that up until that Oregon game, defensive coordinator Jim Knowles was getting a lot of flack on, hey, you're not bringing enough blitz packages. Where's the blitzes? He said, okay, you want to see blitzes? Fine, I'll bring blitzes. And he brought blitzes. Now, he didn't bring them in the Michigan game because that was a slop fest, and any single mistake could have cost you that game. Ohio State's defense did everything in their power to help them win that game against Michigan. We'll talk about what the problem was here in just a little bit. But the defense has been spectacular all season long. It has got to come up big here, especially at defending the run. And when Nico plays well as Dylan Sampson runs well, which is the case 99 times out of 100 when Dylan Sampson steps onto the football field, Nico Iamaleava has been a big part of this Tennessee offense. If he plays well, I think that only heightens Tennessee's chances. I think if you are Ohio State, you got to be able to slow down Dylan Sampson as much as you can. I don't think you're going to be able to stop him. Sampson may still very well rip off 100 yards in this game, but as long as you can limit him to, I'll say, under 4 yards per carry, I think you're still going to feel pretty good about where you're at if you are Ohio State. Now, if he's going to get the ball 30 times, you probably want to limit him to under 3.5 to under 3 yards per carry. But if you are this Buckeye defense, force Nico to throw. Force Nico, an inexperienced in a big moment inexperienced quarterback. Basically, he just doesn't have the experience in big moments that a lot of these guys on Ohio State's defensive side do. Force him to throw and get pressure on that offensive line. It's been a shaky offensive line this year. 26 sacks allowed. Ohio State has got the pass rushing talent to do so. And we have seen that. They got 5 sacks against Indiana in what, for the most part this year, has been a really, really good offensive front and a really talented unit. Ohio State was able to do anything they wanted defensively, and Ohio State's really good at not allowing the big plays. But I said this was the best red zone defense in the country. Tennessee is one of the best red zone offenses in the country. Something has got to give there. Once Tennessee gets into that red zone, if the Ohio State defense lets them get there, are they going to be able to capitalize, or is that red zone defense of Ohio State going to stand strong? That, I think, is the most interesting battle to watch on this side of the ball, besides seeing what Ohio State can do to try to lock up Dylan Sampson. Now, let's talk about the Buckeyes offensively. Will Howard has played really well for Ohio State this season. He has. Contrary to what some Buckeye fans may think, Howard has played very well. 2,860 yards, 27 touchdowns, and 8 picks. He got his bell rung against Michigan, made a couple of mistakes. That one turned sloppy. It was not Will Howard's best performance. But you look at the talent surrounding him, it's just an embarrassment of riches in what Will Howard, Chip Kelly, Ryan Day, and this Ohio State offense have. You start in the tailback room. Quinshaw Judkins, Travion Henderson, both of those exceptionally talented tailbacks that can run really, really effectively. Now, neither one of the two have shown this year to be as effective as what Dylan Sampson does, but the two provide very similar attributes, and once you think you stop one, you have to stop the other, and that is exactly where the problem lies when teams try to defend this Ohio State offense, because they also have exceptional talent on the outside. Emeka Egbuka, Carnell Tate, Brandon Innes, even the tight end G. Scott starting to come along. Oh, and have I mentioned a freshman that leads Ohio State in both yards and touchdowns? It's Jeremiah Smith. The matchup talent on the outside for Ohio State has to be exploited, because in a couple games this year where Chip Kelly has decided, okay, we're going to try to set our identity as a smash-mouth football team. We're just going to run it down your throat. They tried to do that against Michigan. They didn't adjust the game plan, and it cost them. Michigan's secondary was beaten and battered and injured. And Ohio State has superior matchup talent on the outside to anyone in the country, including this Tennessee secondary, and they didn't take advantage of it. They have to in this game. You got to get the ball to Jeremiah Smith. You got to get the ball to Emeka Egbuka and Will Howard. For as good as this Ohio State run game can be, Tennessee's run defense is really good. If the run is not working, we might see Will Howard throw the ball 40, 45, maybe even 50 times in this game. But the other thing that you have to take into account with Ohio State, this offensive line. It has played okay with all the injuries going on, but there are still quite a few holes. And this Tennessee defensive front is pretty darn good at being able to create pressure, especially one man by the name of James Pierce. James Pierce has got 7.5 sacks this year. He leads the team. You have another guy, an Omar Norman Lott in the interior that is really good at being able to build off of what James Pierce does. But James Pierce is the guy that the Buckeyes are going to have to watch out for here in this game. And with that patchwork offensive line, especially being able to run the football to protect Will Howard, there are a ton of questions there for this Ohio State offense. Now, when you talk about this Tennessee defense, again, Tennessee likes to play physical, smash-mouth football offensively. The defense likes to do the exact same thing. They like to go out and prove, hey, we are the more physical team, which against opponents that like to do that defensively, Chip Kelly has decided to run the football as much as possible. Did it against Nebraska, didn't adjust the game plan, it almost cost them. Did it against Michigan, didn't adjust the game plan, and it did cost them because of a couple mistakes that Will Howard made. This is an Ohio State team that if the run is not working, I'm going to be very curious to see if they are willing to adapt that, if Chip Kelly is willing to change that, because if not, it could cost Ohio State this game. Tennessee is really good rush defense, and hey, I know I said Ohio State has matchup talent advantage on the outside with their wide receivers. That's because their wide receiver room is really, really good. It's probably the best in the country. They might have the best wide receiver in the country in Jeremiah Smith. You could argue that point, not what this video is about. Tennessee is still a really darn good secondary, but it is their weak point. It is where if you're going to beat Tennessee, especially with the matchup talent that Ohio State has, that's where you can take advantage of this Tennessee defense. Now, they still have forced 43 passes defended, 11 interceptions on the year. Will Howard's going to have to trust his guys in some 50-50 balls. Howard and the wide receiver room must take advantage of their talent. Jeremiah Smith, Emeka Egbuka. You can make the case on why those two guys are at very least top 10, if not 2 top 5 wide receivers, and they both play for the exact same team. More often than not, in some stages here throughout the season, Ohio State has not had a game where they've targeted Emeka 12 times, where they've targeted Jeremiah Smith 15 times, and I think this is the moment where they have to do that. They have got to take advantage of their talent. It's up to Chip Kelly if they want to exploit that, which I think they have to. Now, again, this Buckeye patchwork offensive front against this Volunteer defensive front. I think that's the big key here. If Tennessee can pressure Will Howard, can generate some sacks, can generate some negative plays, as well as just take the crowd out of this one. And I'll talk more about that here in just a little bit. But especially against the patchwork offensive line, Ryan Day has said that you probably are going to see some guys rotate in and out of that offensive line throughout this game, try to figure out what works. That sounds to me like they're trying to solve the offensive line in game. And the last two times they did that, it did not go over so well. I think Ohio State is going to have a much better game plan in this game. I think that Kelly and Ryan Day have learned that if the run game is not working, they're going to go away from that, and they know that they have matchup advantage talent on the outside with Jeremiah Smith, Emeka Egbuka, Carnell Tate, Brandon Ennis. They can be able to throw the football, and that's how they can win this game. Another thing that is playing to the hands of the Buckeyes' advantage, well, actually three things, but they all kind of coincide: the environment, the weather, and the experience that the team possesses. Tennessee has never been to a college football playoff. Ohio State has. Tennessee does not have as experienced of a roster as Ohio State has, both offensively and defensively. And when you talk about this game being played in Columbus, Ohio, in 20-degree weather with the possibility of snow, guys, look, I'm not trying to dog on Tennessee when I say this, but the volunteer bench, I think it was the running back or the wide receiver room or something, was complaining on a 55-degree day in Athens, Georgia, that their bench warmers weren't working and they weren't getting enough heat. On a 55-degree day, a lot of folks in Columbus would tell you that's shorts and t-shirt weather. It's a scarlet out as well. The Buckeyes are breaking out the all-scarlet uniforms, and it's a night game in the shoe. They have not had one since, I think they played Western Michigan. This is going to be a rockin' environment here with Ohio State, and I think the environment and the weather and the experience of this team come into play here. I don't think Ohio State's going to cover that 7.5-point spread. There are too many question marks, but Ohio State is a talented enough team to go win the national championship. So is Tennessee. And if the Buckeyes cannot slow down Dylan Sampson, and if Nico plays well and that offense is clicking on all cylinders, for even as good as this Buckeye defense is, it's going to be hard to stop. But I trust the experience of Will Howard. I trust especially the experience of this Buckeye defense and this crowd and this environment and the weather. I think will play a huge factor here in this game. And I think it's why Ohio State is going to come out with the win. I think this is the most exciting first-round game. I really could see this one going either way. I had a very tough time trying to predict this game. But Ohio State has been in the doubting realm for people have been doubting Ohio State for so long now. I think Ryan Day and company can use that as fuel. At least Buckeye fans better hope they use that as fuel, and they come out, they might have a rabbit or two in their hat, a trick up their sleeve, and I just think the experience of Ohio State will take over, especially defensively. I think Will Howard plays himself a pretty good game. I think Dylan Sampson and Nico are going to have themselves pretty good games as well, and for both of these teams, both of them love to thrive off of that turnover margin. I think they're both +5 or +6. I don't think it's going to matter here in this game. Now, turnovers could come into play, especially if it does snow. I don't think it matters too much here. I think each team comes away with a couple takeaways. Just the experience and talent level of Ohio State, a little bit too much, and it's why the Buckeyes will get the rematch against the Ducks in the college football playoff quarterfinal, I should say. That's going to do it. Please go back and watch all of my first round preview and predictions. We'll talk a little bit more about the playoff before games officially start Friday night. Remember to play hard but tailgate harder. See all you guys in the next video. Goodbye.